Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Practical Psychic Podcast. I am Lauren, your host, and today we are talking about neurodiversity and the psychic ability, and I have a special guest here with me. I have Karen Fox. She is my mentor. She has been on the show a couple times now, and if you are listening, just know that you can also watch this as a video on YouTube, also on Spotify, or you can just listen wherever you are getting this podcast. But we have done a couple podcasts together now. We have done a podcast kind of like introing Karen, how we've met. So if you really like this one and want to kind of dive into more of that, you know, that's available. We also did a podcast a little bit more about like diving into the psychic industry. And what else did we talk about? We talked about predictions, we talked about premonitions, and we kind of like talked about more of that in-depth stuff that you come across when you've like been practicing for a long time. So yeah, we've got some other stuff that we've done together. So you can go check that out. But I'm going to pass it off to Karen, let her kind of introduce herself and kind of any resources or announcements that she might have, classes, sessions that she might want to throw your way.
Well, thank you, Lauren. It's so nice to be back again and talk about things psychic. I love doing that with you. I'm a psychic, medium, and medical intuitive. Been doing this work for about 6 years. And I think everybody's psychic. And so I started the Aspen program for psychic development in 2010 in Denver, Colorado, which is how I met Lauren. And she was an Aspen coach, really good one. And I tell you, the coaches, I think, learn more than the students because when you teach, you learn. I have a set of 90-day cards, Build Your Psychic Skills, that is out there by Schiffer Publishing, and the Psychic Workbook, also by Schiffer Publishing. But right now, I have done 4 children's books, and I'm looking for a publisher and an illustrator and hoping to get that out. One is based on my grandson's experience when he saw a mommy sitting on his potty chair, although in the book, she's just sitting at a table. One's on seeing auras. Children often see them and they just don't, no one ever talks to them about it. And then one is on having dreams, which I think we all have them. And that's where a lot of psychic information can come from. And then the 4th book is sort of for babies and beyond. It's about remembering who you are. It's really like a lyrical kind of book more than anything. And I'm also working on a novel about a Scottish family who comes to Virginia in the Shenandoah Valley in the 18th century, which my family did. Actually, they were here long before that, but they came to the valley in the early 18th century, and they value intuition. So I'm really having fun with that right now. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm sure my website will be listed on the below this recording. And I also suggest you check out my website, psychiciq.com. Under resources, you'll see something there about clairs. There are 6 clairs, and I'm sure, I know Lauren teaches them, and you might want to refer to them just to know what they're about, because I'm sure we're going to talk about them today. But I'm really glad to be here, Lauren. I'll hand it back to you.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm really excited too. We're gonna another podcast that we've got planned is we want to jump more into like talking about kids and how to help kids, when they're dealing with their own psychic experiences. So we've also got that planned in the future as well. But this one we wanted to get to because a lot of you have come to me over the years because you've had various experiences, because a lot of you have various different neurodiversities, different diagnoses, and you're also opening up your psychic abilities. Not all of you, but maybe you're just also curious, and it's kind of like causing various struggles, and I've just gotten this all over the place. I'm autistic, I have ADHD, I have synesthesia, I have aphantasia, and it's been something that just keeps coming up, and I get asked that question a lot. And I kind of do my research here and there. And so when Karen came along, I kind of like asked her if she's dealt with this. And so we kind of, put our heads together and we're like, hey, let's research this and maybe we could speak to it. And I'll have to say we got in a little over our heads because the more we researched it, the more we kind of realized we have to research even more. So kind of a disclaimer here, like this is more of a discussion. This is not necessarily us providing the end all be all answers. And I will provide a blog post as well that goes along with this podcast in the show notes down below. So if we find more resources, I will constantly be updating that. So maybe always check that out, even if this podcast is a little old as you're coming across it. So maybe you can check that out and find even more resources as time goes on. But yeah, I want to just shout out to everyone that kind of helped us out. We had a lot of you just reach out, fill out forms. We had a lot of like private conversations here and there. And a lot of you kind of gave us your like one-on-one opinions about what you experienced, and it was really helpful. Anything else you want to speak to around that, Karen, before I move on?
Yeah, it was interesting to find out just how much neurodiversity and what there's just so many categories and concepts and ideas, and it's not just ADD or autism, it's so many things. I mean, I have a client who has aphantasia, something I'd never heard of. I heard of synesthesia, but not aphantasia. And the more I read about it, I'm like, oh my goodness. So it's such a wide range as how do you talk to it. So both Lauren and I have been talking to people. We've been considering, well, how do you deal with it? So we hope to give you some ideas for how to approach wherever you lie in this large category that is becoming a more popular term, apparently, out there in the world.
Yeah. And let me just kind of jump into defining what neurodiversity is, and I'm just going to read this straight from what I found online. So neurodivergent refers to individuals whose brain learns, behaves, and processes differently than what is considered normal. The term embraces a variety of neurological differences as variations rather than deficits, and that all of us likely have varying ways that we think, learn, and interact with the world. This includes autism spectrum, including Asperger's, ADD or ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, dyslexia, aphantasia, synesthesia, etc. Neurodivergence is not a medical diagnosis, but rather a descriptive term. So yeah, it kind of seems like an umbrella term. And whenever I kind of like threw this at people that I talked to, it almost was like, you know, everyone was like, well, I would even argue that some of those wouldn't be described as neurodiversity. And some people would say, oh, that's not the case, you know. So it seems like it's an umbrella term for some people, and other people, they wouldn't consider that. So it's a very loose term, but I would say, I don't know. It does seem to encompass a lot of that kind of like different processing individual or people who process things differently in their brains, right?
You know, the issue isn't necessarily to define what neurodivergent is and say, and it is an awful lot of things in that category. It's to acknowledge that people's brains are different. You know, I'm a baby boomer. When I was in elementary school in the 60s, everybody came in, they sat still, they were expected to sit still. None of this ADHD stuff. There were a few kids you could tell who had issues, but I really believe that even then there were people whose mind functioned differently. And now that we've had decades of people eating different foods, of having different environmental pollutants, just technology, the way it affects your brain, I think that it's time to acknowledge that all of our brains have been different. And we're just trying to give in some additional ideas for how to approach developing your psychic ability, because we both believe everybody has it. So some people may feel like the way their mind functions hinders their ability to be psychic. For some, they may feel it actually makes it better. So our desire today is to give you some ideas if you feel like you're somewhere blocked and everybody has blocks. But if your mind works so differently than whatever we consider normal nowadays, that's what we're here to do, is to kind of give you ideas for how to help you get through that and develop your abilities and use them.
Yeah, and we were kind of thinking at first, we were like, oh, well, let's piece apart all of these things. Let's piece apart ADHD. Let's piece apart autism. And then it was just getting way too complicated, and we'd have to research all of these different, diagnoses. But, one thing I kind of found, and I'll put this up in the edit, this was a photo that I kind of found from Color Me Neurospicy. And she kind of made this wheel, and obviously this wheel is kind of rudimentary. She actually makes a wheel that you can purchase and download. It's a PDF printout, and you can color it in yourself if it's something you want to like play around with. But she kind of makes this wheel to highlight the different areas in which our brain kind of might deal with different things in our life. So let me just break this down. So like obviously we have impulsivity, like how impulsive are you? And on this spectrum, it's like how much can you control that? Is that really easy? Are you not super impulsive, or are you very impulsive? And so somebody with autism versus somebody with ADHD versus somebody with synesthesia versus somebody who's neurotypical, which is something I forgot to mention. Neurotypical is somebody who maybe not is maybe somebody who doesn't experience a lot of these things. We think of them as maybe the average person, but we're again maybe redefining that maybe everyone is not so average. And then we have inattention, which is like how much can you pay attention. We have time blindness. It's like how much are you able to like pay attention and be aware of time versus like does it just totally slip your mind and time just passes by. We have hyperactivity. So, that's kind of that very typical like ADHD thing that we think of. But that's like also if somebody who has inattentive ADHD, they don't exhibit that hyperactivity that, a hyperactive like ADHD person has. And then we have like dysregulation, like how easy is it for you to get dysregulated? Task paralysis, which is basically like how much do you put off tasks and how easy is it for you to stay on task? Hyperfocus, how easy is it for you to focus on something and get something done? And then sensory issues, which is like, tactile, auditory, visual, when you're going into a crowd, like, I think of like highly sensitive people often when I think of that. But again, with this wheel, everyone's going to have different kind of like spectrum. You're going to fall in a different sort of place in here. And so my thought here is that basically you kind of have to understand where you fall within this like wheel and just know that every neurodiversity is going to look different. But even within that specific diagnosis, each person is going to look different. Would you expand or agree with me on that, Karen, I guess?
Yeah, I think the wonderful thing about this era, the new millennium, is we no longer, I hope, try to funnel kids into one, this is what's normal. I'm not sure it was ever normal in my little elementary school. I think everybody has to kind of figure out where they land, and it's an individual thing, and maybe you can get advice from someone who's a specialist in this area, but everybody really is different, and they're going to approach psychic abilities differently. We hope to give you some ideas about that today.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though, like, for me, I would define myself, on book as a neurotypical person, but I can tell you my hypersensitivity is probably more up there. Like, I get really sensitive to noise, and so I wonder if that puts me in some sort of box, but who knows?
Well,
but
autistics are often more sensitive to noise and smells, and touch bothers them. Yeah. I'm not saying you're autistic. I'm just saying that's typical.
Well, and I was telling Karen before this that I actually went and got a test because I just wanted to see, my insurance covered it. I was hoping to get the test results before this podcast, but I didn't. But I'll keep you all updated because I'm very curious to see where the crossover is between like a highly sensitive person versus autism. They also tested for like everything else, and just like, psychic abilities. But yeah, I kind of wanted to move on. Like Karen, when we were at the Aspen program, she basically asked everyone to take a test as we came into that program. Can you tell us a little bit about what you had us do?
So I asked them to take the Myers-Briggs personality test, not to put everybody in a box, because I don't believe in boxes. I saw it as a springboard to better understanding maybe how you do everyone does psychic ability differently. When I took that test in high school, they wanted us to help us figure out what we could be as an occupation, and I was an INFJ, and it said in the paragraph that you're the intuitive ones, meaning I suppose the other 15 personalities were not, and that I had allergies, which I thought was really weird. What's that have to do with personality? But in sensitivity is allergy sensitivities, and I was curious. The only reason I really at first had asked people to take the test is because I was curious, because I wanted to see how people tested out and who came to the program. And so I was just looking at the percentages. 55% of the people who came to the Aspen program were either INFJs or ENFJs, which I thought was really interesting. And out of the 16 personalities, the majority of the people were six personality types. There's 16 together, but they were six, had the largest number of people. And what I did, I worked with two therapists, because I am not a therapist and I don't know much about the Myers-Briggs. You can take the test online. It's a short test. It's free. And what's really important is to remember the percentages. And I sat down with therapists who helped me understand how, for example, an ESFJ might be psychic. What would their strengths be? What would their weaknesses be? And so I don't think I did it for all 16 personalities, but I did it for most of the ones who came to the program, because I gave them a handout. And that's really what I wanted to do, is to say, this is probably your strength, probably your weakness. I talked about what clairs to focus on to make it stronger, but it's not like this is any definitive. It was just something to get us talking about how to improve your abilities, because I really don't think INFJs are the only psychic personality types. And the closer you are in the percentages to zero, you'll get percentages for those four letters. And the closer you are to zero, the closer you are to doing both. So I'm sure when I was a teenager, I was a super introvert. If I was introduced to anybody, I'd turn beet red. Into my 20s, I did that. But when I had to go out and live and function and take care of my son, I had to be an extrovert. So I test closer to like about 10 or 20%. So it's a really interesting thing to consider, but it isn't like an end-all be-all about psychic ability. It's just something to help you think about how you can improve your ability. And one thing I'd recommend, and this is something I always said in the program, is if you have one clair that's really strong, great. But develop the other clairs, because it'll make the clair that's strongest even stronger.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I thought that was a cool test to do, just because it was helpful to learn about yourself. And so, Karen was doing that already at the Aspen program. And so when we thought about doing this episode, she was like, well, let's just do it again with everybody who identifies as neurodivergent. So we kind of sent it out in our newsletters, and I put it up on my socials. And we were kind of surprised at the results, or not surprised. And what were kind of the results that we got back? I'll let you share. Hey everyone, future Lauren here. I'm kind of recording this on the back end of this after it's already over. We were having trouble recording this, and we left out a chunk because we basically had some issues connecting here, and we had to jump off and start recording again. So we skipped ahead, and we forgot to talk about some of the responses that we got from you guys. And so this was kind of a small sample size, so it's not definitive by any means, but we were genuinely surprised, because we thought we were going to get very different results here. We thought we were going to see something completely different. Okay, like you're maybe neurodivergent, and so therefore you're going to have some sort of, different results here. But we turned out to see that most everyone was still INFJs and INFPs. Like the majority of everyone still kind of fell within those same mile markers. And again, this is more of like a personality test. But when we got these results back, and as you were all sending them in, Karen and I were just kind of like surprised. We were like, whoa, okay, that's interesting that there's no difference here. So if you're still interested, I will put that down in the description down below. You're welcome to test it, and feel free to put it in the comments down below. I'd love to still continue to gather more evidence and put it into our blog that we are kind of gathering after the. I also want to say that this morning that we had this podcast, I had a dream that I was here in my shed recording, or I wasn't recording, but I was having a reading with some client, and I was having internet connectivity issues, and I was having a hard time connecting to my client who I thought I was reading. And in the dream, I was like, oh geez, I can't like hear you, I can't connect to you. And I looked outside and I thought that there were like planes going by, and that's why I wasn't able to like connect with the person that I was reading. And so that morning I jotted down a note in my phone, and I was like, oh, I need to go add that to my predictions blog later. Then I didn't think anything of it, jumped on with Karen, and then you'll see later in the podcast that she had a very similar prediction that happened, and basically neither of us listened to our intuition, and we basically moved forward with the podcast anyway. We joked about this after the fact that both of us should have listened to our intuition and just stopped with the recording, because apparently what happened on the day of us recording this, there was a massive internet outage across the whole US. Anyway, let's get back to it. I kind of want to move on now to kind of like how can we actually strengthen our abilities with these different conditions, and some of the tips and tricks that we would say to try. So I think we'll just kind of go back and forth and give some ideas that we have. Karen, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll say to the group that views that they're neurodivergent, what I'd say to any student, which is you've got to do the 3 Ps, practice. And it may be that if you have blocks that fit into one of these neurodivergent kind of characteristics, you may have to practice more. And persistence. And the persistence means you may need to discover your way of doing it that maybe Lauren and I or some other teacher hasn't come up with. And I'll give you an example. I was talking to Patty, who is a client of mine, and we Zoomed several times to talk about it. She has aphantasia, which means that she has difficulty visualizing, not just psychically, but in any way. If you ask her to visualize a lake, she has difficulty with that. And she discovered that when she leaves her eyes open and she stares in the distance and kind of lets her eyes go, she will sometimes see images that come from the side. Now, or sometimes it'll come right in front of her. So in some ways, if you fall under these characteristics, you might need to be persistent with sort of figuring out, well, how might I do it differently because my brain is wired differently. So practice, persistence, and patience. Really, you cannot start developing your psychic abilities and in a month or 2 months just be so good at it. It takes time. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that kind of mirrors, we got a question from RJ. RJ says, as a person with ADD and aphantasia, I've yet to find a way to quiet my mind and tune in. Guided meditation, breathing meditation, walking meditation, mantra meditation, or any kind of mindfulness activity, nothing has worked yet. I can't visualize anything, and I can't focus longer than a few seconds to use my other senses yet. Part of me wants to give up, but the other part of me believes I wouldn't have stumbled upon this path if it wasn't meant for me to open my spiritual gifts. So he asked, is it possible for someone like me to develop my psychic abilities? And, again, I think Karen's, advice applies here. And I think that, again, a lot of it is like you might have to put in a little bit more effort than some, but I think it's in Matt Oren's book, which again I'll put in the resources. He kind of talks about how I think he even mentioned that, like, he worked with people with aphantasia, and he even said, like, some people with aphantasia still dream in images. And even when he pushed them to practice and practice, that even over time he still did see improvement, and that they would start to visualize. So I will say it's not impossible. I won't say like it'll guarantee work for everyone, but he also recommended like focusing on like swinging a pendulum in front of your eyes and, you know, using that to calm your mind. And it reminded me, Karen, of you talking in the Aspen program of focusing on like a candle flame, and maybe, like you said, like focusing on something visual instead of like trying to close your eyes and you know, maybe not paying attention to something visual. Maybe that would actually help more. He also has some other cool meditations in that book of like imagining not imagining, but literally being in a pool or a shower and having the water envelop you and like combining that with a visualization. So there's, it's just kind of
good
like,
idea.
Yeah, doing a literal physical approach, combined with a visualization, you know, and I shouldn't say visualization with aphantasia, but it's like there's a different way to kind of do it, and you just kind of have to like work around it and maybe just kind of take a different approach and advice than maybe everyone else is kind of doing, if that makes sense. But yeah.
And you see, I know that I taught you have to meditate, but you do not have to meditate to be psychic.
Yes.
What you need to be able to do is turn off the mind chatter. It just happens to be that meditation helps with that. But maybe, like you say, swimming or walking the dog even helps with that. You know, you need to be able to turn it off. And I recommend that in today's day where we have so much noise going on, that you turn off technology part of the day, that you just spend time alone without anything, not even a book, because we need to learn to turn off and go in. The main thing is, can you get into a zone? Whatever gets you there is good. Meditation doesn't have to be it at all.
100%. Yeah.
When I first started meditating many decades ago, it took me about 2.5 months just to get the mind chatter to stop. And so it takes time, and that was way before we got into this world with technology that's all around us. Try spending that hour or two before you go to bed with nothing, no TV, no phone, no music, nothing. We are so accustomed to having noise in our life. I had a friend who's passed away now, and I'm a baby boomer. She was beyond me. Every time I went to her house, there was music on. Every time, all the time. We had a group there, always music. Drove me nuts. But there were reasons why she had to keep her mind active. It had to do with her childhood. And I just suggest to you to take the noise out of your life, daily life, and maybe you'll be able to get in the zone. You have to learn how to turn the mind chatter off and get in this connected zone. That's what you need to develop your abilities. But I will tell you, there are people who will tell me you don't even need to do that. I know cops who have been in very stressful situations. One of them I talk about in my book, the Psychic Workbook, and she didn't meditate. She didn't meditate. She don't believe in all that stuff. And yet she had to respond. It was life or death. And she knew exactly how to get in that zone. So the people who play basketball, they tell me when they get in the zone, they know how to throw the ball. So it's sports, do sports. Don't think it has to be meditation.
Yeah.
Free yourself from that.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's another thing that I always ask people too when they come to me, and like I ask them, well, have you actually done it? Have you actually sat down and tried to do the psychic exercises, or have you actually sat down and tried to actually apply your psychic ability? And this is not everybody, but nine times out of 10, I will find that a lot of people haven't actually, tried to tune in or do an exercise more than once or twice. And, so another piece of this is, understanding that the psychic ability is not a quick fix. Like, it's not something that happens overnight. And so, yeah, just kind of echoing what you were saying earlier of this is something that takes time. and make sure that you're actually putting in the effort to kind of do it continuously. And again, with neurodiversity, it might be something that you have to put in just a little bit more work than the average person. And, I would always say too that try another Claire as well. Like sometimes we get caught up on really wanting one Claire, like I really want to visualize, and maybe that Claire is really difficult for you. Maybe clairvoyance is just not going to work right away for you. So try to maybe make another one come through. And I promise that, once you are...
Try a fun one.
Yeah. Like once you're... Even if you're like working on another Claire.
Like psychics... Yeah, psychic smelling, which is clairalience. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Clairgustance, which is tasting. I mean, a lot of people who sense spirits often will smell like cigar smoke. I was reading someone one time, and I started smelling like it was right here, not, in my mind's or my inner nose. Start asking your nose to give you a scent. Even if you can't smell it, if the feeling of cinnamon comes to you, then say, okay, what does that mean? I'll try the other Claires. You might find that helps you. I agree totally.
Well, and I think when you're building those other Claires, it'll naturally, help the Claire that you probably want to strengthen anyway, as well. And we have some Patreon members in the chat as well. And so Melanie's even mentioning too. She said something she's noticed with ADHD. Is that, what is she saying? Some of what is actually coming in our mind is messages, and it's not always about getting quiet. Or what is she saying? Sorry. As someone with ADHD, some of what is actually coming in our mind is messages, and it's not all about quieting everything but learning to differentiate between your mind and spirit. And yeah, Melanie was one of those folks that I talked to about this, and thank you, Melanie, for taking that time to share, because Melanie, I kind of gave the tip to of like, maybe focusing on, because she had a hard time of differentiating between what were her thoughts versus what was spirit. And I said, maybe focusing on spatially, like where are your thoughts? Like, day to day, when you're going and getting groceries, when you're, taking care of your kiddos, like where is Melanie? Where, like, if you were to place yourself, like where is she? Is she like in the middle of your head? Is she in her heart? And then when you feel like, okay, that was definitely spirit, where does it come from? And like when I'm reading, I kind of feel like spirit comes in from behind me sometimes. And then like I feel like when it's me, I feel like I'm in like the center of my head for some reason. I'm curious if you have something different, Karen, but yeah, that's just another way to kind of differentiate. But
yeah, I think the point Lauren's making is we all do psychic differently.
Yeah.
And I tend to be, when I go throughout my day, I don't usually tune in. I probably should, but I don't. I do when I do readings. I do, and I usually send my clairsentient energy. I'm more clairsentient. I send the energy to be with the question. So I'm here. My client's there. I send the energy to be with that client who's on the phone, or to the question. And then I start getting information. And sometimes I know it comes from a spirit because it comes from over there. Or, like it's not just directly coming from me. And it is important. I think Melanie's right to sort of get it. The more you practice and the more you fail and learn from failing, then the more practice it teaches you where it comes from. And you'll usually know. The more you do it, the more you'll know. In fact, people always ask, I'm sure you get this, Lauren, how do I know if it's psychic or me? Yeah. Well, practice.
Yes. Yeah.
I know you hate that, but it is about practice.
Yeah. And Melanie even said, like, she had a harder time than normal kind of trying to let her brain relax. And she also, like, it helped her, and she said it was okay for me to share this. It also helped her to control her ADHD a little bit more, which I thought was really cool. Because she was able to kind of like understand that difference between psychic mind versus her normal mind. So I think, even developing your psychic abilities could be, again, not making a blanket statement here, but it could help in a lot of ways, maybe with those neurodiversities, maybe. Let's see.
I know I have ADD people in my life. I think they're some of the most interesting people. My son's ADHD, although he's not as hyperactive as he was. He's probably older than you, Lauren. And they ADD people, in my experience, they think outside the box. I remember his teacher telling me, I don't know how he comes up with the answers. He does it in a different way. But she was the last teacher, I think, who felt that was intelligence, because they want you to fit down a narrow pathway. Mm-hmm. But ADD people think differently, and that's why they're so creative. Some of the biggest geniuses have ADD or Asperger. I mean, Einstein was probably an Asperger. I mean, yeah. I just think that's an interesting thing, that the idea that could be a benefit in some way.
Yeah, yeah. And my husband is also ADHD, and I asked him, because he's pretty familiar with the psychic ability, and I said, do you feel like it hinders you or it helps you to be psychic sometimes? And he really thought about it, and he's like, well, it more depends. Like if I want to connect, I feel like I can, super hyper focus on connecting, but if I'm like not in the mood and I'm focusing on something else, it can make it really hard for me not to connect. So I think, again, it's about kind of understanding your specific, diagnosis, like what's going on in your specific neurodiversity, and working with it. And then also understanding how the psychic ability works and how they kind of interact and commingle. But any other tips that you can think of, Karen, for people?
Well, one thing I'd like to say, and this is sort of to anyone, I mean, it's, I think what is normal anyway anymore, is that we have been taught not to listen, or not to even have this part of our mind. It's like it doesn't exist. And I think we're doing better with that, but we haven't gotten there yet. And so here we are wanting to be psychic, but there's nothing about our daily life that says, oh, we respect this. If anything, our society does not. And so I think to want to be psychic is great, but our mind, I think some part of our mind doesn't entirely trust us, because I think we're all getting information to help us, whether it comes from spirit or your higher self or some deep guidance. And we don't listen to it. I don't listen to it all the time. And it's like, so why do we expect it to be there when we just take a class, or we try to be more psychic? I would suggest that when you have some private time, you sit down and talk out loud to your psychic mind, your inner awareness, your inner being. Like, I really want to do this. Let whatever you want to come out. And just kind of make friends with it and say, I really want to do this, but I'm having problems. Will you help me? Will you be patient with me? Because I think, why should this part of you or me believe this when we walk through our day ignoring it? When I teach classes, I ask them, how many people, raise your hand, got a hunch? And most everybody raises their hand. I said, how many of you didn't follow it and wish you did? Most of the hands stay up. And it's because we don't live in a society that values it or teaches it. And I think you might just start off by having an out loud conversation with this part of you and asking for help. I believe there's a part of us who really wants to help us and give us insight and give us suggestions. And I think it's sad that that kids lose this ability when they usually by the time they go to first grade or kindergarten.
Yeah.
We had taught, Lauren and I Zoomed with Michael, who is an occupational therapist who's connected to Lauren. And he has both an autistic child and a Down syndrome child. And he had some interesting things to say. First, he was the one who told us about the book, the one for autism and the instinct. Maybe you can put it in the little thing below.
I did say
But he also said if you have aphantasia, if you can't visualize, he says try automatic writing, which is you try doing this every morning, make it a habit, or maybe every evening, where you just start writing. You don't have to, if you're thinking about it, your thinking mind's getting in the way, just start writing. And you're open yourself up to let something happen. You don't have to think, am I being psychic right now, or is there chatter? Just write. Stream of consciousness writing. And I thought that was an interesting suggestion that he made. Yeah, he was the one who recommended a book, and I just don't have it sitting right here. Yeah, Autism and Sensing, The Unlost Instinct. That's a book he recommended. Autism and Sensing, The Unlost Instinct. Someone told us about the telepathy tapes. You told me, and then the day after, I had somebody else tell me about it. It's about people who are not verbal. Autistics often aren't verbal, if you're really down the continuum. And they're finding some interesting research on their communicating in other ways, intuitively, with telepathy. And so I often think that it's the people who are different, who, if we just listen to them, they help us understand some phenomena like psychic ability or life in general in a new way. Because when you're just going down this narrow pathway and you don't really account for people who are different, you're not learning. I'm not learning about something. This whole project was really interesting because it got me thinking about something I hadn't considered. And I probably have students who were in this category and I wasn't attending to their needs. So it's good to hear that there's other ways of being psychic. There's not just one way. So I just appreciate having an opportunity to talk about all this.
I totally agree. I think that, and to speak to kind of like, chatting with Michael, Michael also brought up a great point of, a lot of what we're talking about also applies to kind of like high functioning people with these diagnoses or, non-diagnoses as well. So this, we kind of don't apply this to lower functioning diagnoses because, this, gets into a different territory with those folks. But I do think, yes, watching those telepathy tapes, if you're super interested in this, that would be a good place to go next because they really dive into that to a whole nother level. And I actually think they're going to make a documentary about that. Okay. So I just kind of like wanted to preface that and pass you on over there because they're doing even more cool work over there. But yeah, I will put all of these links in the blog, and as I'm coming up with them, I will throw them there because I also, found a really cool TED Talk about like schizophrenia and like the relationship between that and mediumship. And, there's all sorts of cool things I'm constantly finding. And so I'm always just kind of collecting that, and I'd like to keep that updated. But yeah, I think we're going to kind of wrap it up there. You guys haven't seen it on your end, but we have had awful tech issues all day with this podcast, and we're just like smiling through the pain right now.
See, and I knew, let me just interrupt you. I knew something told me psychically this morning she was going to cancel it, and I thought, because I knew she had some stuff going on, and I'm thinking, okay, that's just not going to happen. And then I didn't even realize. I should have just checked in a little longer and realized this is probably a technical issue. So, we psychics don't know everything. So, yeah, this was an interesting experience, Lauren.
Yes, it was. We just kind of powered through it and made it happen. But
I think you have enough.
Yes. I think so. But yeah, I think, kind of just to reiterate and sum this up, I truly do believe that even if you have a neurodiversity, I still think you are psychic. I still think that you can develop your skill. You just might have to come at it a little bit differently than somebody else, but that's no different than anybody else that is approaching the psychic ability in my mind. So just keep practicing, keep trying different techniques, and know that there's resources, there's mentors. You can reach out to Karen, you can reach out to me, and we have a lot of awesome people here to help you with that process. Again, I have courses. You can reach out to me for one-on-one sessions. I have my YouTube with a lot of free resources. You can follow me on Instagram, jump over on Patreon as well. We do practice nights over there, and we get together a lot to help each other out. And you can also sign up for my email newsletter. I am also going to be opening up the Psychic Development Society here at the end of June. I'm also going to pass it back to Karen so that she can let you know how you can find her.
Well, you can find me on my website, which is psychiciq.com. I will say that I'm now referring people who want to have psychic development classes or mentorship to Lauren. I think she's excellent at what she does. I highly recommend her. She has incredible just YouTube videos and things. Just it's amazing. You're on every platform, and I think she's got a lot of really good information. And because she's so open to this topic, I mean, I would suggest you do this with any teacher, but I would suggest you just ask a question. If you're not getting something, maybe in the discussion, the whole group can find something that we all learn about it by listening to what your question is. So don't be shy and raise your hand and say, hey, I can't do what you're suggesting, or I do it a different, or maybe you do it a different way, suggest it, because we don't know everything. But I appreciate your having me here, and I think it's been a lot of fun, notwithstanding the technical difficulties.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Karen.
It is a full moon. Lauren reminded me of that.
Yeah.
No more full moon podcasts.
Yes. Yeah. No more full moon podcasts. Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for watching. Be sure to follow the podcast, rate it, leave a comment. Let us know what you think. Thanks, chat, for bearing with us as well. I know you were all on Patreon being like, what is happening? So sorry as well. But thanks, and we will see you next time. All right. Bye.